Namaste friends, welcome you all for Sankalp CET course. In today's class we'll continue with the chapter Locomotion and Movement. So we'll discuss in this class difference between red muscles and white muscle fibers. Along with that we can discuss about the disorders related to muscular system, and along with that we can discuss about the different types of joints. So let us take some questions related to the chapter, right? So where exactly we were discussing about the different types of muscles we discussed already. First question: the muscles causing movement of food. Muscles causing movement of food in stomach. Generally, we know that in the visceral organs, in the internal organs, or you can say that the visceral organs, what is it? Spindle-shaped muscle fibers are present. So these spindle-shaped muscle fibers are uninucleated and non-striated. That is, we can say uninucleate, non-striated. Non-striated muscles, or we can also say that the unstriated muscles. So in the the visceral organs, like you can say digestive tract and reproductive tract. In case of digestive tract and reproductive tract, we can see these the visceral organs. Hence they are also called as generally smooth muscles. Smooth muscles. So answer for this is unstriated muscles. In case of striated, we can say it includes both. It may be cardiac or skeletal muscle, but cardiac, which will be branched uninucleated. Skeletal muscle is unbranched multinucleated. So answer for this is unstriated muscles. Next, 42nd question: the characteristic feature of muscle fiber is the presence of large number of parallelly arranged filaments in the sarcoplasm. This is a muscle fiber. This sarcoplasm, which will be called it as, generally the cytoplasm of the muscle fiber is called as sarcoplasm. Cytoplasm of the muscle fiber, cytoplasm of muscle fiber is called as sarcoplasm. Sarcoplasm. In this, these muscle fibers are arranged, the parallelly. So these muscle fibers, they are parallel to each other and they are parallel all along the length of muscle fiber. So these structures, which are generally called as microfilaments and the microtubules, these are the cytoskeletal elements. Generally, we will consider these structures as cytoskeletal elements. They provide what we can say that the shape to the cell, and also helps in the cell movement, and they provide structure and shape. Cytoskeletal elements, these two, and myofibril is the one, these which are parallelly arranged and present seen in the muscles, generally in the muscle fiber. So myofibrils. These myofibrils are made up of generally two types of filaments. That is, we can also call it as myofilaments, myofibrils, which includes actin and myosin. Actin and myosin. In the next question, we can take this. An isotropic band is made up of. An isotropic band, already we know that generally in this band, we can say in the A band, we can see the dark thick myosin, that is A band. It is confined to A band only. It is not extended to I band. From ear to ear, if you consider that I band, here in the center of the I band, we can see Z line. To that Z line, we can see the attachment of actin filament. So actin filaments, which will be there, they are overlapped into the A band. So this is the I band, and which is thin, and this is made up of actin. In I band we can see Z line, right? In the middle of the I band we can see I band, we can say that isotropic. Why? Because only the actin filament throughout the length, only actin filament can be seen, right? So these are generally the actin filaments. So here in case of the myosin, we can see overlapping of this is myosin and this is actin. There will be a overlapping, hence we can consider as that is a dark anisotrophic. Isotrophic means throughout in the cell biology, throughout their length, or I can say that structurally they are made up of same type. And here anisotrophic, different types. They're not with the same type of cells, different types. So that is what happened. In between this Z line, what is the portion is there, which is called as the sarcomere. That is what the contractile unit. The contractile unit. So structural and functional unit of muscle fiber is sarcomere. So in this case, what is it? The answer for this anisotrophic band is made up of. Anisotrophic band is made up of. See, there will be overlapping, but anisotrophic band is made up of myosin only. So answer for that is myosin filament. Right. In this case, next question, the functional unit of striated muscle. Just now I mentioned that generally the functional unit of the striated, or you can say that the any of the muscle which helps in contraction, functional unit which is also called as contractile unit. Contractile unit. So that is answer for that is sarcomere. I band is generally that is the isotrophic. Z line, that is what present seen in the I band in between, and myofibril means these are what is it, the myofilaments. Next question. Number of bones present in cranium. So in this case we can see that the cranium, we know that that is also called as brain box. So in that brain box we can see what is it, the frontal 1, parietal 2, temporal 2 will be there, and then what is that, the occipital 1. So total you can say 6, and 1 is what is it, along with that sphenoid and ethmoid. Sphenoid 1 and ethmoid 1. So these are the bones. Total 1, 2, 3, 5, 7, 8. So 8 bones are present in the cranium. So these 8 bones, what is that, which forms the cranium. Cranium is also called as brain box, which protects the brain. Hence it is called as brain box. Right. So here we can also expect a question. Among those, what is the, generally we know that the skull bone, generally skull is made up of both cranium and what is it, the face. So facial bone, there are 14 bones, cranium 8. So total you can say that the 22, and along with that laterally there are ear ossicles. Ear ossicles in the middle ear, there are 6. Total in the skull, the head region, they are going to ask, we can say 29 bones are there. 29 bones. So this is a very important thing. And which are the unpaired on, you can, what is it, the, remember this, parietal and temporal are what is it, the paired. All other are unpaired in the skull bone. Right. So that is what you have to keep it in mind. Next, let us move on to joints. So what is that we can say about this joints? Joints are the articulation point, where you can say that these are the points of contact between bones. Joints are the points of contact between bones. Contact between bones. So here the points of contact between bones or we can also say that between bone and cartilage, the point of contact between bones or between bones and cartilage, bones and cartilage. So whenever we're going to see this, generally the bones is the articulatory surface will be there, where we can see that the other bone, long bones or small bones, and this is what is it, the covered by membrane. So this is synaptic membrane. So this, sorry, synovial membrane. So this membrane, not synaptic, synovial membrane. In the synovial membrane, or we can say that this cavity which is present, that cavity is called as that the synovial cavity. Cavity is filled with a fluid called as synovial fluid. So synovial fluid. So in this synovial fluid, generally, which is what is it, the viscous, thick, slippery, right? Because of that, with the help of this fluid, there will be a large or considerable movement in the synovial joints. Synovial joints. So one joint we can take that complete movement will be there because of the synovial fluid, right? So in this case, the generally movement will be in all planes, or it will be in one plane, or what is it, the back and fro, right? So front and back, like that there will be a movement. So here, because of that movement is because of synovial fluid, that is a synovial joint. And there are different types. Generally, what is it, the ball and socket joint, which is present between what is it, generally in the shoulder joint. So in case of shoulder joint, we can say, which is made up of what is it, the humerus. As we all know that the head of the upper arm, that is the bone of the upper arm is called as humerus. Humerus, what is it, which attaches with the glenoid cavity, that is the pectoral girdle bone, that is mainly scapula, glenoid cavity of the scapula. And same like that, what is it, it also forms the hip. A hip joint is also an example for ball and socket. Movement will be there in all planes. So this is a thing you have to keep it in mind. So whenever this what is it, the fluid will be there, if it won't affect, there will be movement can be expected. And hinge joint. So hinge joint are generally seen in three regions, but in each and every place where we can say pair are in between what is it, the knee joint, right? So that is in between knee joint, right? And in between what is it, the elbow joint, and in between you can also say that ankle joint. So there are generally in these three places we can see hinge joint. So in this case of hinge joint, right, so if this is the elbow joint, where you can bend, right, like this, right, but not backside. So hinge joint only in one, what is it, the plane, only in one plane, movement in one plane. So that is the thing you have to keep it in mind. So one is ball and socket joint, B hinge joint, and the saddle joint. Saddle joint, which will be there generally carpals and metacarpals of Carpals means wrist bone, metacarpals means what is it, the palm bone. So that too mainly in this palm bone, carpals and metacarpals of thumb, right? So that is what you have to keep in mind. And last, that is in case of we have a gliding joint. Gliding joint generally present between the carpals, that is a wrist bone, and also between what is it, this is very important, between sternum and ribs. Between sternum and ribs. So these are the different joints. So along with that, one very important thing here you should keep it in mind: joint between atlas and axis, pivot joint. Pivot means we can also call it as a rotatory joint. Means one bone, if you consider this generally the axis with a odontoid peg, on that the other bone, that is the first cervical vertebra, that is called as atlas. Atlas pivots over the axis. Atlas pivot over the axis. So between atlas and axis. So atlas is the first cervical vertebra and the second cervical vertebra is axis. Second, this is the first cervical vertebra and this is second cervical vertebra present in the cervical region, that is in the neck region. So these are the different types of the synovial joints. So and the other joints here we can consider that the second type of joint is, we can say that the fibrous joint. So before going to take this fibrous joints, let us take here will be the more movement will be there. Here will be slight movement, that is cartilaginous joint. Cartilaginous joint present the seen in between, right, in between vertebrae. So vertebrae, in between vertebrae we have intervertebral disc. Intervertebral disc. So this disc is generally made up of hyaline cartilage. This disc is generally made up of hyaline cartilage. So this is the one example which we can see, that is what you can say that the cartilaginous. And this cartilaginous joint in between, generally it is made up of white fibrocartilage. Note, white fibrocartilage. Because of this there will be a slight movement. White fibrocartilage, that is between the vertebrae, and also this cartilaginous joint also present seen between sternum and vertebrae. Sternum and, generally we can say that sternum and ribs, not vertebrae, sorry, sternum and ribs. And the third one, which is immovable, it never helps in the showing movement, immovable. So in this case generally no movements at all present seen in between the skull bones, that is which forms sutures, right. This is mainly because we can say that the each and every the bones, what I mentioned, frontal, parietal, temporal, they are attached with the sutures that forms a fibrous joint. This joint is made up of white, generally we can say that white collagenous fibers. White collagenous, keep it in mind, collagenous, which is a proteinaceous fiber, highly rigid, and makes those joints which are immovable, right. So these are the things you have to keep it in mind with respect to the joints. Let us take some other questions. So acromion process is a part of, generally already we have discussed this acromion process, which will be there in the shoulder blade, that too in the ridge of the shoulder blade. So this is what we have drawn in the previous class. We discussed about this. So this is, here is the acromion process, and here is one more below, there will be a coracoid process, and this is a glenoid process. This is a glenoid cavity where humerus attaches, and this one is acromion process. Acromion process seen in spine or elevated ridge of the ridge called spine, elevated ridge of scapula. Scapula is also called as shoulder blade. So let us take, that will be seen in, we know that to which clavicle, acromion process, which receives generally clavicle bone. clavicle, which is also called as collarbone. Clavicle, which is also called as collarbone. So clavicle and scapula together forms a pectoral. Clavicle and the together forms pectoral girdle. So here the thing you have to keep in mind that femur, which is a hip, generally which attached with the hip bone. Femur is generally which is the bone of hind limb, longest and strongest bone. Pelvic girdle, that is also we can say that the hip bone. Vertebral column, where we can see that intervertebral disc. Next question. Number of bones in cranium, face and middle ear. Cranium, we know that there will be 8 bones. In face, I already mentioned that there are 14 bones. Middle ear, we can say that the ossicles. Generally in each ear there will be 3. That is malleus, incus, stapes. Malleus, incus, stapes. Stapes is the smallest bone, right? Actually these bones which helps in the conduction of sound waves in the middle ear. So 18, 14, 3 and what is it, the 1. So in this case that we can say that the hyoid bone is a 1. Hyoid bone, the bone to which the tongue muscles will going to attach and forms a floor of the buccal cavity. Forms floor of what is it, buccal cavity. Floor of buccal cavity. So answer for that we can say 8, 14, 3, 1. Right. So cranium, we can say that. So 8, 14, that is middle ear, 3, 1. So your option is not correctly given. That is 8, 14. Make it any one option like this and you can select. Okay. Next. Number of bones present in forelimb. So one humerus bone, that is humerus 1, and then mainly we can say radius and ulna. Radius and ulna together, that is 1, 1, 2, and carpals 8 bones. And then I already discussed about this with the diagram. We can recollect that carpals and metacarpals 5 bones, and phalanges which forms a digits 14. So totally we can say that 30 bones will be there. So 30 bones are present in the forelimb. Next, joint between phalanges. So that is what we can say digits. So whenever we are going to see this, the joint between the digits, which mainly we know that there are different types of joints. One is pivot joint, hinge joint. Hinge joint is one plane. Pivot joint between, generally we can say that is in case of atlas and axis, and saddle joint that will be there in case of carpals and metacarpals. So that is what we can say the phalanges. So whenever they articulate, one bone which articulates with the other bone to maintain to show that movement, that which will going to form a joint. So here we can say answer for that is, you can select that is the saddle joint. So phalanges. So phalanges, we know that is which includes the carpals, generally between the carpals, right? And here between the phalanges digits we can see that the saddle joint, like thumb, right? Phalanges we can consider that is the thumb, right? I already mentioned it is saddle joint. And next question. Next question we can take, that is match the column 1 and 2 and select the correct answer. Yes, just read out this question. Smooth muscles, we know that generally these smooth muscles are present in the visceral organs. They are involuntary. Smooth muscles are involuntary, and like that tropomyosin, it is present seen in tropomyosin, which is present in associated thin filament, that is actin, right? If this is the globular filamentous, and that which we can see tropomyosin. At regular intervals we can see 3 subunits. What is it? Troponin. So this is called as tropomyosin, right, associated with actin. This is troponin, right. And red muscles, right, we'll discuss that in the next question. The red muscles are generally with more myoglobin, right, and skull with the sutures. So A4, right, and B2, C1, and D3. So answer for that is first one. So here you have to keep it in mind. Let us know about a difference between red muscles and the white muscles. So what exactly the red muscles and white muscle? What are these red muscles and white muscle? So in this red muscle and white muscle, right, so very clear difference is that based on the more number of myoglobin, or you can say that the more amount of myoglobin, we know that which imparts a characteristic feature, mainly due to abundant myoglobin. Here we can see there's a abundant myoglobin. In generally we can say that in white muscles also myoglobin are present, but is that less amount, less myoglobin, right. These will be with more mitochondria, and these are with less mitochondria, and here we can say that, as we know that the more mitochondria, and we can say more oxygen is required, and they're going to show that the aerobic, what is it, the respiration. I can say, we can also say that aerobic metabolism, and here anaerobic metabolism, due to which lactic acid sometimes accumulates, and anaerobic, and more amount of oxygen is required to supply more blood supply will be there, more blood supply, because it has to supply more oxygen for that aerobic process. Less supply of blood vessels, less blood supply. So if there is less blood supply means we can say less blood capillaries. Here more blood supply, more blood capillaries. In this case, less sarcoplasmic reticulum. We know that storehouse of calcium ions. And here in this case, more abundant sarcoplasmic reticulum. So these are the things you have to keep it in mind. Because of these, which I mentioned here, this red muscles which shows slow contraction, less amount of calcium ion, and there will be longer sustainability. There is slow and for longer duration there will be sustainability. You can say slow, sustained contraction, sustained for longer. So here, because of this, there's a fast, I can say short sustained, I can say that fast contraction and sustain for short duration. They won't sustain, they get fatigue. Here very the less fatigue will be there, and here more fatigue will be there, right. So next question, joints between humerus and radio ulna. So we know that generally the one direct the movement in one plane. I already mentioned ball and socket in all planes, shoulder joint, hip joint, pivot joint, atlas and axis, gliding joint, that is which is present between the carpals, right, and hinge joint, we can see that one plane. So what exactly here we can say, that is the humerus and radio ulna, which forms elbow joint. I already mentioned this elbow joint. The answer is hinge joint. Now, which of the following statement about the joint is false? See, cartilaginous joint permit great movement. No, that is wrong. Statement is false. So cartilaginous joint permit great. No, that is little movement. Whereas synovial joint permits great movement. Permit great movement. So this is wrong. Joints are contact between bones and between the bones and cartilage is correct. Fibrous joints are immovable. That is what in between. Generally seen in skull. That is between sutures. Flat bones are attached with white collagenous fiber. Joints are essential for all types of movements involving bony parts. That is also correct. So wrong is cartilaginous joints which permit great movement. Mark the incorrect statement. Saddle joint between carpals and metacarpals of thumb. So this we discussed. That is correct. And ball and socket joint between humerus and pectoral girdle. That is also correct. Shoulder joint, you can also say that. Cartilaginous joint between pre-zygapophysis and post-zygapophysis of two adjacent vertebrae. That is what zygapophysis means. What is it? Articulation surface. Articulator, we can say articulation surface present in what is it? Vertebrae. Right? So vertebrae. The present above, that if you consider this is a body, right, and this is the neural canal, and this is transverse process, and this is spinous process. Here they are present, they are called as what is it? The pre-zygapophysis, below which they articulate with the other one, that is post pre-zygapophysis and post-zygapophysis. So these are the articulations. And gliding joint, right, in which where you can say that in this case generally cartilaginous joint, right, where exactly in between the disc, or you can say that the between the vertebrae, right. So in this case the answer for that is generally that one. The cartilaginous joint, we know that that is present between what is that? Vertebrae, that is intervertebral disc. So the articulation where it will be there, no movements will be generally what is it? The same. So in this case the wrong statement, incorrect statement, gliding joint will be there between the carpals, that is also correct, and between humerus and pectoral girdle, that is also correct, between this one, and where cartilaginous joint between, that is what, because of intervertebral disc, not the articulatory surface, not in the articulatory surface. Articulation, there will be bone, one vertebrae above which the other bone, or I can say that the 1 to 1, if it is above articulate, that is means we can say that the in the anterior region, that is we can say pre-zygapophysis, in the posterior region we can say post-zygapophysis, and these helps in articulation but not in movement. So this is going to keep it in mind. And next question we can take, that is gout is due to. So before going to take what is this question, we can have a question, some discussion about the disorders. So these disorders, they are associated with the muscular what is the disorders. Let us take some few disorders, right, exactly, that is which are given in the NCERT book only. Myasthenia gravis. So myasthenia gravis is an autoimmune disorder. It is the autoimmune disorder that is mainly affects, what is it, autoimmune disorder mainly affects neuromuscular junction, which is also called as motor end plate. We know that motor end plate. So motor end plate, where the axonal terminal which ends on the surface of sarcolemma. So This junction is called as NMJ. If NMJ is affected, generally leads to fatigue, weakening, and paralysis of what is that, the muscle fibers. What is that paralysis? The complete or partial loss of muscle contraction. It may leads to weakening because of this, the NMJ which will going to affect, that may leads to weakening of the muscle fiber, and you can say that which may leads to paralysis. What is the meaning of paralysis? Complete, or we can say that the partial loss of muscle function. What is the function of muscle? What is it? The fibers, or you can say that the muscles. Mainly we can say loss of skeletal muscles. Keep it in mind. What is it? The complete or partial loss of skeletal muscle function. They won't perform their function. Contractibility, extensibility, right? And then along with that, which will be also helpful, that is excitability, where the acetylcholine reaches and it will going to show action changes or generates the action potential due to depolarization. So that is the one it affects. And one more, you can say that the muscular dystrophy. In case of muscular dystrophy, it is genetic disorder. So in this muscular dystrophy, what happens, whenever we say that genetic disorder where genes won't they perform proper function. So genetic disorder, it is an inborn abnormality of muscle association with dysfunction and deterioration. Keep it in mind, this is very important. So inborn abnormality because of no gene, what is the proper gene to regulate this function. So inborn abnormality of muscle association. There won't be a proper association where it has to contract properly. Association with, what is it, dysfunctioning of muscles will be there, and along with that, with deterioration, means it will going to reduce deterioration. So this is very important. That means degenerates. Means all muscle, right, degenerates. So degeneration of skeletal muscle due to genetic disorder. That is what? Defect in gene. So in tetany, that is, we know that what is the meaning of that? Accumulation of the uric acid. Tetany, that is the gout. Right, we'll take tetany, that is a wild contraction. Now general notivi muscle catch aitu anta, wild contraction, muscle catch aitu andre artha that cramp, right? So complete spasm, that is wild contraction, we can say rapid spasm, because what is it, mainly due to low availability of calcium. Less calcium ion will be there. So that is the reason in case of tetany, wild contraction. And here we can say that the gout, right? So gout is mainly because of, right, gout, which is the accumulation of uric acid in joints, right? So that is gout. Excess uric acid, that may lead to inflammation of joints. And osteoarthritis is also related to the arthritis only. And in this case, osteoporosis, the one more, that is the arthritis and osteoporosis. This is mainly due to, this is the bone loses both minerals, their deficiency of minerals and also fibers. It loses both minerals and fibers, right? That leads to, from its matrix, that leads to generally the bone mass will going to decrease. Osteoporosis, where bone loses, right, minerals and fibers. Because of that, decreased bone mass, decreased bone mass, right? And if bone mass decreases, there will be a chances of the increase, the chances of getting fractured more. That is, you can say that the increased chances of fracture, increase chances of fractures. ಮುರಿದೋಗ್ಬಿಡುತ್ತೆ ಬೋನು. ಡೆನ್ಸಿಟಿ ಕಡಿಮೆ ಆಯಿತು, ಈ ಯಾವಾಗ ಮಿನರಲ್ಸ್ ಫೈಬರ್ಸ್ ಇರೋದಿಲ್ಲ. ಹಾಗೆ ಓನ್ಲಿ ಮಿನರಲ್ಸ್ ಇಲ್ಲ ಅಂದರೆ ಡಿಫಿಷಿಯನ್ಸಿ ಆಫ್ ಮಿನರಲ್ಸ್ ಏನದು ಜನರಲಿ ಕ್ಯಾಲ್ಶಿಯಮ್ ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ಫಾಸ್ಫರಸ್, ಇದು ಎರಡೂ ಇಲ್ಲ ಅಂದರೆ, ಅಬ್ಸರ್ವ್ ಆಗಿಲ್ಲ ಕ್ಯಾಲ್ಶಿಯಮ್ ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ಫಾಸ್ಫರಸ್ ಅಂದರೆ, ದಟ್ ಈಸ್ ಡ್ಯೂ ಟು mainly due to deficiency of or I can say lack of vitamin D, right? Lack of vitamin D, or you can say deficiency of vitamin D, in which no calcium and phosphorus absorption takes place. If no absorption, right? No vitamin D, and there won't be the absorption or reduced absorption of calcium and phosphorus. Reduced absorption of calcium and phosphorus. So here we can take, that is the question related to this. Gout, already mentioned that excess accumulation of calcium ions in joints. Sorry, excess accumulation of uric acid. Excess accumulation of, so calcium ion, wrong. And then low calcium ion, that is also wrong. Low uric acid content, that is also wrong. Accumulation of uric acid crystals, that is correct. So find the odd one out. So in which you can say that generally arthritis and gout and osteoarthritis, all these which comes under the different types of arthritis only, in which there will be inflammation of joints will be there. We can say rheumatoid arthritis, osteoarthritis. ಒಂದು ಡಿಫ್ರೆನ್ಸ್ ನೋಡ್ಬೋಣ. ಆರ್ಥ್ರೈಟಿಸ್ ಅಂದರೆ ದಟ್ ಈಸ್ ಮೇನ್ಲಿ ಬೈ ಇನ್ಫ್ಲಮೇಷನ್ ಆಫ್ ಜಾಯಿಂಟ್ಸ್. Inflammation of joints, where you can see that in case of the gout also we can see, in case of gout, that is the excess accumulation of uric acid, where that will going to deposit in the joints, and that forms inflammation, right? Excess accumulation. Osteoarthritis, where we can say that in this condition at the joints, articular cartilage will be affected. Articular cartilage which will going to affect. So articular cartilage which affects, that is we can also call it as generally rheumatoid arthritis. You can say synovial membrane will be affected, right? Osteoarthritis, articular cartilage, right, affects, right? So gouty arthritis ಅಂತ ಆದರೂ ಕರಿಬೋದು. ಹಾಗೆ osteoarthritis, right, we can also call it as rheumatoid arthritis. ಸೊ ರುಮೆಟಾಯ್ಡ್ ಬಂದು ಮೋಸ್ಟ್ ಕಾಮನ್ ಏನಾಗುತ್ತೆ, ಇನ್ಫ್ಲಮೇಷನ್ ಆಫ್ ಸೈನೋವಿಯಲ್ ಮೆಂಬ್ರೇನ್ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ. ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಮೂರು ಆರ್ಥ್ರೈಟಿಸಲ್ಲಿ ಈ ಮೂರು ಕಾನ್ಸೆಪ್ಟ್ ನೆನ್ಪಿಟ್ಕೊಳ್ಳೋಣ. ದಟ್ ಈಸ್ ಒನ್ ಈಸ್ ರುಮೆಟಾಯ್ಡ್ ಆರ್ಥ್ರೈಟಿಸ್, ರೈಟ್? ಈ ರುಮೆಟಾಯ್ಡ್ ಆರ್ಥ್ರೈಟಿಸ್ ಅಂದರೆ ಇನ್ಫ್ಲಮೇಷನ್ ಆಫ್ ಸೈನೋವಿಯಲ್ ಮೆಂಬ್ರೇನ್ ನೆನ್ಪಿಟ್ಕೊಳ್ಳಿ. ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಸೈನೋವಿಯಲ್ ಮೆಂಬ್ರೇನ್ ಅಫೆಕ್ಟ್ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ, right? And then the second one we discussed, that is osteoarthritis. Here I already discussed, that is articular cartilage affects. Osteoarthritis, right, in which what is it, not synovial membrane, articular cartilage affects. That is articular cartilage affects. And the third one, that is gouty arthritis or gout, that is excess, what is it, the accumulation of uric acid leads to inflammation. This is very very important. So tetany, we know that is spasm, right? Rapid spasm due to low calcium, and so this is the odd one out. So option interchange agide, so we can take that tetany. Imbalance of certain hormones, deficiencies of calcium, vitamin D are a major causative factors. Just now we discussed that imbalance in hormones, deficiency of calcium and vitamin D. So we can say that the lack of the vitamin D, which in turn no calcium and no the phosphorus, that may leads to that. Here you have to keep in mind that hormones, they mentioned deficiency of calcium, and they are not mentioned here fibers, right? If fibers affected, that is we can say that is we can also consider that generally that is osteoporosis. Along with that, we can also add fibers. So imbalance of certain hormones, deficiencies of calcium and vitamin D, that is osteoporosis. So in this case, osteoporosis, we know that when there will be lack of vitamin D, no reabsorption, or you can say reduced reabsorption of calcium and other the minerals like phosphorus. So this is the thing you have to keep it in mind. And next question you can take, that is osteoporosis and age related. That is what I mean. Person generally after 45 years, mainly in females, that is because of the hormonal changes, to maintain that generally the minerals and fibers along with minerals, what is it, the in the bone matrix fibers content should maintain. This is reduced due to reduced level of estrogen, right? So what is it, we can say osteoporosis is an age related disease of skeletal system, may occur due to accumulation of uric acid leading to inflammation, that is gout. Wrong. Decreased level of estrogen, that is what estrogen generally more will be there in the female, hence the female are highly susceptible to this osteoporosis after 45 years or 50 years. So decreased level of, right? So NMJ, neuromuscular junction, we know that where exactly myasthenia gravis, right? That leads to fatigue, right? Next question, ribs are attached with, we know that, so ribs are attached with the breastbone is also called as, what is it, sternum. Ventrally, they're going to ask ribs are attached ventrally with, you can select. So if they are going to ask dorsally with, dorsally we can say thoracic vertebrae, thoracic vertebrae ಜೊತೆ ಅಟ್ಯಾಚ್ ಆಗಿರುತ್ತೆ. ನೆಕ್ಸ್ಟ್, substance that accumulates in phatic muscle, we know that generally in anaerobic, what is it, the metabolism will be there, the lactic acid in muscles which will be accumulated and cause fatigue. Human cranium is small, what is it, the protuberances at the posterior end and the at the posterior end. They can say that the posterior bone means occipital bone. It has a protuberance, means condyles. So two condyles will be there like this at the posterior end of the skull, right? They are called as, I already mentioned that they are called as condyles. There will be two condyles. So occipital condyles which articulates with generally atlas, right? So condyles will be there, occipital, in the occipital bone there are two, so they are called as occipital condyle, two bones. Next, myoglobin occurs in, as we know that myoglobin which will be present in both red fiber and white fiber, right? So in this case both 1 and 2 we can select, right? Next, which one is not a feature of red muscle? Feature of red muscle, red muscle contain more amount of myoglobin, that is correct. As a more mitochondria, that is also correct. They obtain energy anaerobically. As more mitochondria, more myoglobin helps in transportation of oxygen, not anaerobically, that is aerobically. That is the wrong. It is not a characteristic, it is a characteristic feature of white muscle fiber. They has a less amount of sarcoplasmic reticulum, that is correct. So incorrect one, or not a feature of red, that is they obtain energy anaerobically. Which of the following statement is correct regarding sliding filament theory, right? So this is for your homework. Already this type of questions were solved once, so you can solve this, okay? Simple answer, right? So intercostal muscles, we all know that intercostal muscles means in between the ribs, where the sternum attaches with ribs, attaches with sternum, in between the ribs there is intercostal muscles. So with this we can select 64. Yes, we can conclude this chapter. So thank you all, right? So with this we can finish locomotion. We finished locomotion. Thank you.